Alright, it's time for an update and forecast on the Mosquito Fire burning about 30 miles west of Lake Tahoe. We'll just start off with the numbers. Looks like it's at 41,443 acres. If we want to see where the recent growth was on the Mosquito Fire, what we can do is actually turn off the data from today, see where it was yesterday, and then turn on today's data again, and you can start to get an idea where that recent growth was. Key spots that point out to me are that northeastern section of the fire, and then we also have that little finger on the southern edge right there, and then some filling in around Forest Hill. Now, Forest Hill is one of the places we've been the most concerned with because that's where the fire was going right up to these structures here. But there's actually some good news in this area. They had a successful firing operation. If we zoom in here, keep your eye on this section right here above the Middle Fork American River. So if we turn off today's growth, and a little bit slow right now, there we go, that's turning off today's growth. And then if we turn it on again, you can see how they were able to bring the fire down and connect it with the river. So the reason they do firing operations is to clear out some of the fuel when you have favorable conditions, and then by the time it gets very hot and dry in the afternoon, then there's not as much fuel for that fire to continue to consume and grow and just spread with. Now, another area that we were watching closely was this area right around here, because if we go over to this map, you can see this is a section of the fire that has a lot of structures on it. So turning on structures, we were concerned about this spot right here. You can see all those orange dots represent the structures, and we had a lot of activity there recently, but as of right now, we're not seeing any hot spots on that section of the fire, which is some great news because that was actually the area that we were the most concerned about yesterday. Now just turning on and off that section of the fire, you can see minimal, if any, growth whatsoever down there. And when we look at the containment, you'll actually start to understand why that is a little bit better. So I'm just going to quit out of Google Earth. I think that's making the computer go a little bit slow right there. We're going to come back here and let's look at that containment number, because this is something that has changed since the last time I did one of these forecast videos. We have 10% containment. If we actually want to see where that containment is, that's the fire perimeter right there where the line is red, that's where the fire is uncontained. Where we have the black line is where we do have some containment, and it's right in that section of the fire that we were concerned about yesterday near all those structures. So great to see that some part of this perimeter has turned into that black color, which means they don't expect any more growth in that area. Now I also noticed a little containment on that southern edge. And if we zoom in around Forest Hill, this is where some of the good news comes in. Although it's not officially contained, those little black X lines that you see all over right here, those represent dozer lines. We can actually look at that in the legend down here. We have completed dozer line. That's what those represent. So a lot of protection around the Forest Hill community. So overall, we've gained some containment, and I expect us to gain even more as we continue to move forward. Now, there are still a number of evacuation orders and warnings in place. I never actually go through these in these videos because by the time you're watching it, it may have changed. Although I will just say you can either find this link in the description, or you can go to Inciweb. I also have this link in the description. Scroll down to these two links right there, and then you'll find a map that looks something like this that shows exactly where those mandatory evacuations are, which are in that red color, and the evacuation warnings, which are in the yellow color. And it does look like those warnings have stretched a little bit closer towards Lake Tahoe than the last time that we were looking at it. So if you are local, always good to stay updated with those resources. And I also posted these links to Holt Hanley on Twitter as well. So that's kind of the idea of what's going on right now. We had some growth yesterday, but not all that much, and we did gain some containment. So a lot of our factors that we're thinking about have been moving in the right direction. And most recently, this was 4:48 p.m., 3 large air tankers and 2 very large air tankers requested back to the fire and will be working along the eastern side of Forest Hill Road in the northeastern area of the fire near Hidden Treasure Road. So let's try to figure out how much activity is going on as of right now, and then we'll actually do a forecast to see how much activity we expect to happen in the future. So easiest way to figure out what kind of activity is going on the fire is to look at the satellite imagery. We're looking at this big blob of smoke to the west of Lake Tahoe. To actually see how far west of Lake Tahoe, we could zoom out right here, get our ruler, and last I checked it was about 28.5 miles away. Yeah, still about 28 to 29 miles west of Lake Tahoe, just to put that in perspective right there. So, key thing that I notice, lots of clouds moving through this area, and we even have some thunderstorms starting to pop up in the Sierra. We'll look at the radar in a second. That's all that leftover moisture from what was Hurricane K. And if we zoom out right here, you can actually see the remnants of Hurricane K off of the coast of Southern California right there. So it's still spinning some of that moisture in. And there was actually so much moisture over the fire last night that they had to stop some of their firing operations because they would put fire on the ground to try to clear out some of the fuel, and it would just go out because there was so much moisture. So you could say that doesn't exactly help us that we weren't able to do the firing operations, but it always does help to get a little moisture to calm down a fire, especially considering how active this was just a few days ago. Now, the other thing that's been working in our favor today, other than this increased cloud cover, which creates some shading, which means you have lower temperatures. It also brings some moisture with it, which increases your relative humidity, which the more moisture you have in the air, the more moisture finds its way into the finer fuels, and then the slower that fire is going to burn, and also the less of a chance you have of a burning ember being picked up by wind and starting a new little spot fire. Now, the other part of shading that we have is just shading from all of this smoke that's been produced. Now, this is something that we saw a couple of days ago on the Mosquito Fire as well, where it created so much smoke one day that overnight the winds died down and all that smoke settled to the surface, and then it was so thick that it actually almost provided like a protective barrier over the fire and led to very calm conditions the next day. And overall, that looks to be a little bit what is happening right now. So we'll just look at this. This is a 3-hour time lapse. Calm conditions throughout the morning when we had all that shading. You notice you can't really see any sky in here. But then you start to see some of this smoldering action pick up in the last hour or two. And that, I would say, is expected as we get to the warmer parts of the day. And we'll check just how warm we are right now in a second. But first, I actually just want to look at where the activity is on this. So it makes sense that we saw the one report that they're bringing in some very large air tankers. Where you see those red dots, that's where we've had the more recent activity on this fire. So good to see that we don't have as much around Forest Hill. Good to see we don't have as much around that southwestern section where we had a lot of structures. Most of that activity on the eastern side, which actually goes along with what we were saying yesterday in the afternoons. Our winds have been from the southwest. We can actually turn on some winds. Yeah, so it looks like those winds are blowing towards the northeast, or coming from the southwest. And what that does is basically just tries to push that fire towards the northeast, and that looks to be exactly what is happening. Now, something else we could do is just check out where we have some current heat. Yeah, it looks like the heat that we're picking up right now is on that eastern section of the fire. So goes exactly along with what that wind plot was showing us right there. Now, interested to see how many structures are in this relative area. You notice when we're comparing the fire perimeter with structures, most of those structures were on this area around Forest Hill and that southwestern side right there. Not as many structures on this eastern side. And then if we look at fire history, we do have some recent fires like the 2013 American up there, and then the 2020 Point Fire right there. That'll have cleared out some fuel, so we'll start to slow down as we get into those burn scars, hopefully. But in this whole section, not a whole lot of recent fire history. So that means there's a lot of very dry fuel in this area. About 97% of the state's in that severe drought category. So a lot of dry vegetation right there that'll allow this fire to continue. So makes sense that they're bringing in those very large air tankers to try to stop this fire in its tracks before it keeps going. Now, when it comes to the resources on it, we've talked about that a little bit so far, but the personnel is up to 1,808. And then I also just wanted to look at these weather concerns. No big weather changes forecast for Sunday. Smoke and clouds will be expected to shade the fire. We've been talking a lot about that, resulting in somewhat reduced fire behavior. High temperatures will be generally in the 80s and minimum humidity 25 to 30%, which isn't all that bad when you consider wasn't all that long ago we were in the low 100s for our temperatures on this fire with some relative humidity in the low teens, very hot, dry conditions, and winds will be generally southwest 5 to 10. So not very windy. Kind of makes sense why our smoke is just able to settle over this fire instead of being pushed out by winds. So now let's actually see what kind of weather conditions are on the ground. So let's zoom over to, we'll check out Forest Hill right here just to see what those numbers are. Looks like our max temp is around 86 degrees Fahrenheit today. Mid RH about 15%. So that is still pretty hot and dry conditions, but we've definitely had some help from the fact that we've had so much shading. Max wind gusts only 13 miles per hour, which is not bad at all. Then when it comes to rain, let's refresh this radar and see if we've got anything in store. It does look like there's one little cell right here going over the western side of Lake Tahoe as of right now. I'd be curious to find out if we're able to get any sprinkles over the Mosquito Fire. But thunderstorms, there's always two sides of the coin. It could bring some moisture, some cloud cover, maybe even a little rain, but it can also bring gusty winds on the outflow of this thunderstorm, and then potentially can lead to some lightning and starting some new fires as well. So that's something that I'm going to keep my eye on as we move forward, but as of right now, doesn't seem, based on all the different factors that we're looking at, that there's any exceptional growth that we need to worry about on the Mosquito Fire as of right now. So I'm interested to see what our humidity recoveries will be overnight. Looks like we have great recoveries again, up to 67%. The reason that's important is because when you get good humidity recoveries overnight, that really helps calm down that fire activity. Although, as we saw last night, sometimes it ruins their firing operation plan. So two sides to that coin as well, I guess. But overall, good to see some of this moisture moving in over the fire. Then if we look at tomorrow afternoon's forecast, some of that moisture looks to be sticking around. Relative humidity, 36% for around the time when we would have our low relative humidity. That's pretty good to see right there. Temperature, 80 degrees, so still fairly warm. And then I'm guessing winds are going to be the exact same as they have been. Actually, a little bit windier than we have been, but from that same direction. So once again, if I had to make a forecast for this fire, I'd say doesn't look like we're going to see anything like that one exceptional fire growth day where we had triple-digit temperatures, relative humidity in the low teens, and the smoke plume was, I would say, the biggest that we've seen this entire season. Tomorrow, still warm, but humidity doesn't look that dry. And then these winds, based on the direction, I would say if we're forecasting growth on this fire, it'll continue to be on this eastern side, pushing towards the northeast, and especially in this middle section where we don't have as much fire history. Now, with all that being said, comes down a lot to the personnel on the ground, so depending on what they do, who knows, maybe this fire will continue to be well contained, as it seems like we made some great progress from the last update. Now finally, we can just look at I want to look at the thunderstorm activity, because when we did our little California conversation earlier today, we noticed that it actually seemed there was a better chance for thunderstorms tomorrow than what we had today, which is something that I would say changed in the weather forecast. So throughout this afternoon, still showing some lightning and thunderstorm activity just east of our fire, so then that could lead to some of those outflow boundaries, or outflow winds coming out of the thunderstorm. But if we look at tomorrow, even more thunderstorm activity, so I think we're going to have to keep a close eye on the Sierra. That is a lot of lightning potential, and also the potential for some gusty winds as well. So I'm certainly going to be keeping a close eye on things. We'll also keep a close eye on that air quality, because it has been very hazardous around the Mosquito Fire for a couple of days now. Also forecasting that for tomorrow. And then with those thunderstorms, just going to be a bit of a wild card on the fire to see if that interacts in a good way with the Mosquito Fire or in a bad way. So if you want to stay updated on that, you can subscribe to this channel where I do these wildfire forecasts every single day. So I hope this video was helpful, and thanks for watching.